The stars looked peaceful through the window of the UES Discovery. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the endless darkness of space. His ship had been traveling for 3 weeks, mapping new systems and looking for planets that might support life. It was quiet work, but Jake liked it. Space was big and empty, and most days nothing happened at all. "Captain, we have something on the scanners," said Amy Thompson from her station. She was the communications officer, a young woman who had joined the crew just 6 months ago. Her voice sounded excited, but also worried. Jake walked over to look at her screen. There was a bright dot moving toward them. It was big, much bigger than their ship. "How far away is it?" "About 2 million kilometers, and closing fast," said Dr. Lisa Martinez, the chief science officer. She was studying her own readings with a frown. "Captain, this ship doesn't match any design in our database. The energy readings are off the charts." Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker looked up from the weapons station. He was a careful man who always thought about defense first. "Should I raise shields, Captain?" Jake thought for a moment. This could be humanity's first meeting with an alien species. He wanted to do it right. "Not yet, Ben. Let's try to talk to them first." He turned to Amy. "Open a channel. Use the universal greeting protocol." Amy pressed several buttons on her console. "Channel open, Captain." Jake cleared his throat and spoke slowly and clearly. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Discovery. We come in peace and would like to establish friendly contact." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then the speakers crackled to life. The voice that came through was harsh and cold, speaking perfect English, but with a strange accent. It's primitive. "Mammals, you will surrender immediately. Admiral Krixvoth of the Zephyrian Empire. Your pathetic species will bow before our might or be destroyed." Jake blinked in surprise. This was not how he had imagined first contact would go. He tried again, keeping his voice calm and friendly. "Admiral Krixvoth, we mean no harm. We are explorers from Earth. Perhaps we can work together and learn from each other." A sound came through the speakers that might have been laughter, but it was cold and mean. "Work together? You dare suggest that the mighty Zephyrian Empire should work with inferior creatures like you? You will submit to our rule now, or we will take your worlds by force." Dr. Martinez was watching their scanners with growing alarm. "Captain, their weapons are powering up. Energy levels are increasing rapidly." Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had hoped for peaceful contact, but it was clear these aliens had other ideas. "Admiral Krixvoth, we have no wish to fight. Surely we can find a peaceful solution." "There is only one solution," the alien voice snarled. "Complete surrender. You have 1 minute to decide." On the alien ship Shadowbane, Admiral Krixvoth stood tall on his command bridge. He was 7 feet tall, with gray skin and 4 arms. His red eyes glowed with anger as he looked at the small human ship on his screen. Next to him stood Commander Yelthane, his tactical advisor. "Admiral, the humans seem to think they can negotiate with us," Yelthane said with disgust. "These mammals are even more arrogant than we thought." Krixvoth nodded. "Indeed, they dared to speak to us as equals. This insult cannot be allowed. We will crush them quickly and then report back to the High Command about this new species of slaves." Back on the Discovery, Jake was running out of options. The alien ship was 3 times larger than his vessel and clearly had superior weapons, but he could not just surrender. Earth's colonies had millions of people who depended on ships like his to keep them safe. "Captain," Ben Parker said quietly, "their weapons are fully charged now. I recommend we raise shields." Jake nodded grimly. "Do it." The Discovery's shields came online just as the alien ship fired. Bright beams of energy slammed into the human ship, making it shake violently. Sparks flew from control panels, and the lights flickered. Shields down to 60%, Ben reported, his hands flying over his controls. Captain, we can't take many more hits like that. Jake grabbed his captain's chair as another blast rocked the ship. Return fire, Ben. All weapons. The Discovery fired back with everything it had. Missiles and energy beams shot toward the alien vessel, but they barely scratched its hull. The Zephyrian ship was built like a fortress. Our weapons are having almost no effect, Ben said through gritted teeth. Dr. Martinez was recording everything on her scanners. Even in the middle of battle, she was thinking like a scientist. Captain, I'm getting detailed readings on their technology. This data could be vital if we make it back to Earth. Another blast from the alien ship sent the Discovery spinning. The artificial gravity failed for a moment, and everyone grabbed onto something to keep from floating away. Emergency alarms were ringing throughout the ship. Shields down to 20%, Ben reported. Hull breach on Deck 7. We're losing atmosphere. Jake made the hardest decision of his career. Amy, send an emergency message to Earth. Tell them what happened here. Include all of Dr. Martinez's data. Message sent. Captain, Amy said quickly. Ben, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. Get us out of here. But Captain, our hyperspace drive took damage. I'm not sure it will work. Try it anyway. We have to warn Earth. The Discovery's engines whined as they tried to open a hyperspace window. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then space twisted around them, and they vanished into hyperspace, just as another alien blast tore through the space where they had been, on the shadow bane. Crixfoth watched the human ship escape with rage in his red eyes. Cowards, he spat. They run like the inferior creatures they are. Should we pursue them, Admiral? Asked YEL-Thane.KRIX. Voth thought for a moment. No. Let them run back to their nest. We will report this to the High Command. Soon, a proper fleet will come to discipline these arrogant mammals and bring their worlds under our rule. The Discovery limped through hyperspace toward Earth, damaged but alive. In his quarters, Jake Morrison sat at his desk writing his report. He knew that everything had changed in the last hour. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their first neighbors were not friendly. He looked out at the swirling colors of hyperspace and wondered if his species was ready for what was coming. The aliens had called humans inferior creatures, but Jake had a feeling they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The emergency meeting room at Earth Defense Command was packed with worried faces. Admiral Helen Cross sat at the head of the long table, reading Captain Morrison's report for the third time. Around her sat the most important military leaders on Earth, all trying to understand what this first contact meant for humanity. So these Zephyrians have ships 3 times bigger than ours and weapons that can cut through our shields like paper, said General Robert Kane, rubbing his tired eyes. How many ships do they have? Dr. Martinez stood up to answer. She had arrived on Earth just 2 hours ago when the damaged Discovery finally made it home. From what our scanners picked up, sir, they have a large fleet. But the good news is that their technology, while powerful, seems very rigid. They use the same attack patterns over and over. Defense Minister Carol Stevens leaned forward. What do you mean by rigid? Their ship followed standard military procedures that any academy student could predict, Dr. Martinez explained. They lined up, demanded surrender, then fired in straight lines. No creativity, no adaptation. It was like fighting a computer program. Admiral Cross looked thoughtful. You're saying they rely on their superior technology instead of smart tactics? Exactly. And that might be their weakness. 3 star systems away, the Zephyrian High Command was having their own meeting. The chamber was huge and dark, with 12 Zephyrian leaders sitting in a circle around Supreme Overlord Dexmore. The Supreme Overlord was the largest of his species, standing 8 feet tall, with scars covering his gray skin from decades of conquest. Admiral Crixvoth has reported contact with the new species, Vixmore announced in his deep voice. These humans dared to refuse our generous offer of slavery. They must be punished. Commander Valcor, the military advisor, stepped forward. Supreme Overlord, shall we send the full battle fleet? These humans might have more ships than we. Nixmore made a dismissive gesture with one of his forearms. 50 ships should be more than enough to crush these primitives. We have conquered 12 star systems with smaller forces. These mammals cannot possibly pose a real threat. Admiral Crixvoth, who was attending the meeting by video link from his ship, looked uncomfortable. Supreme Overlord, perhaps we should send more ships. The humans showed some unusual tactics during our brief encounter. Unusual tactics. Vexmore laughed coldly. What tactics could primitives possibly have that would concern the mighty Safarian Empire? No, 50 ships will teach them proper respect. You will lead this expedition personally, Admiral. Consider it a chance to redeem yourself for letting them escape. God. Back on Earth, Dr. Martinez was working around the clock with her research team. Dr. Alan Foster, a physicist who specialized in energy weapons, was studying the recordings of the Safarian ship's attacks. Next to him, Engineer Kate Williams was taking apart pieces of their own damaged systems to see how they had failed. Alien energy beams work on a frequency we've never seen before, Dr. Foster said, pointing at his computer screen. But look at this. The beam stays exactly the same power throughout the entire blast. No variation at all. Kate looked up from her work. That's inefficient. Our weapons adjust power based on what they're hitting. These aliens just use maximum power for everything. Dr. Martinez felt excitement building. They waste energy. What else did you find? Their targeting system is very advanced, but also very predictable. Kate continued. It always aims for the center of mass. It never tries to hit engines or weapons specifically. It's just the biggest part of the ship. Dr. Foster nodded, and their ship moved in perfectly straight lines. No evasive maneuvers at all. It's like they've never fought anyone who could fight back. Dr. Martinez smiled for the first time since the battle. It's because they probably haven't. If you always win through superior firepower, you never learn to be clever. Captain Morrison had been assigned to the War Planning Committee while his ship was being repaired. He sat in a smaller meeting room with Admiral Cross and several other officers looking at star charts and tactical displays. The aliens will probably attack our outer colonies first, Admiral Cross said. New Terra, Beta Station, and the mining colonies in the Centauri system. These are our most vulnerable points. Colonel Sam Hughes, who commanded the Rapid Deployment Forces, studied the map. We can't match their firepower, but we can make them pay for every inch. If Dr. Martinez is right about their rigid tactics, we can use that against them. How? Asked Captain Morrison. Guerrilla warfare, Hughes replied. Hit and run attacks. Use asteroids and space stations for cover. Make them fight the kind of war they're not used to. Admiral Cross looked interested. Explain. Hughes pointed to several locations on the map. These aliens are used to quick victories through overwhelming force. But what if we don't give them targets they can destroy easily? What if we make every battle take weeks instead of hours? Captain Morrison began to understand. They'll get frustrated, maybe make mistakes. Exactly. And while they're busy chasing shadows, our scientists can figure out how to build better weapons. Meanwhile, Admiral Crixvoth was preparing his expeditionary force. 50 of the Empire's finest warships were gathering at the staging area. There, crews confident and eager for another easy conquest. The Admiral walked through his flagship, the Shadowbane, inspecting preparations. Commander Yelting joined him on the bridge. Admiral, the fleet is ready to depart. Intelligence reports that the human worlds are lightly defended. This should be a simple pacification mission. Crixfoth nodded, but something still bothered him about the human encounter. Yeltane, in your opinion, how did the humans manage to escape from us? Pure luck, Admiral. Their primitive hyperspace drive activated at the last second. It won't happen again, perhaps, but their captain showed some cleverness in raising shields when he did, and their ship returned fire immediately instead of simply surrendering. Yeltane looked puzzled. Admiral, surely you don't think these mammals could pose a real threat to the Empire? Crixfoth stared out at the stars. No, of course not. But we should not underestimate any enemy, no matter how primitive they appear. On Earth, the final preparations were being made. Admiral Cross had divided their small fleet into mobile strike groups. Instead of trying to defend fixed positions, they would hit the aliens wherever they were weakest. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only chance they had. Dr. Martinez finished her preliminary analysis of the alien technology. Admiral, I think I know why these Zephyrians are so overconfident. They've been using the same weapons and tactics for decades, maybe centuries. They've never had to innovate because they've never met real resistance. And you think that's their weakness? I think that's going to be their downfall. Humans adapt. We change. We learn from every fight. They don't. Okay. Admiral Cross looked at the reports from all her departments. The odds were terrible, but humanity had one advantage the aliens didn't know about. When humans were threatened, they didn't just fight harder, but they fought smarter. The Zephyrian Expeditionary Force jumped into hyperspace, heading toward human territory. Admiral Crixfoth expected to crush the human resistance within days and add another species to the Empire's collection of slaves. He had no idea that he was about to face an enemy unlike any the Zephyrian Empire had ever encountered. An enemy that would learn from every mistake, adapt to every challenge, and never give up, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The war was about to begin, and both sides thought they knew how it would end. The alarm sirens were screaming on New Terra Colony when the Zephyrian fleet arrived. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood in the command center, watching 50 alien warships drop out of hyperspace like angry hornets. She had been expecting this moment for weeks, but seeing the enemy fleet still made her heart race. All defensive positions, report status, she said into her communicator. Missile batteries ready, came the reply from Lieutenant Dave Wilson. Fighter squadrons launched and standing by, reported Commander Nancy Bell from the flight deck. Crowned forces in position, added Colonel Sam Hughes, who had arrived just days before with his rapid deployment troops. Captain Rodriguez looked at the tactical display. The alien ships were moving into standard attack formation, just like Dr. Martinez had predicted. They were lining up in neat rows, preparing to blast the colony's defenses with overwhelming firepower. Remember the plan, everyone? Rodriguez said calmly. We're not trying to win this fight. We're trying to make them work for it. On the Shadow Bang, Admiral Crixfoth studied the human colony with satisfaction. The defenses looked pathetic compared to Zephyrian technology. A few missile platforms, some small fighter ships, and what appeared to be hastily built bunkers on the planet's surface. Commander Yeltane, begin the standard bombardment pattern, he ordered. Target the missile platforms first, then the planetary defenses. Yes, Admiral. All ships, commence firing. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with devastating energy beams. The first wave of attacks destroyed several missile platforms, exactly as planned. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of the remaining defenses trying to fight back in a hopeless battle, the humans scattered like leaves in the wind. The fighter squadrons split up and dove toward the planet's surface. The remaining missile platforms went silent and seemed to disappear. Even the ground forces vanished into the cities and hills. Where did they go? Yelthane asked in confusion. Admiral Crixfoth frowned. Scan for energy signatures. Okay, they must be hiding somewhere. But before the Zephyrians could complete their scans, the humans struck back. Missiles came flying out of the asteroid belt where they had been hidden. Fighter ships popped up from behind the planet's moons, launching surprise attacks on the alien formation's flanks. The Zephyrian ships, ranged in their perfect battle lines, found themselves under attack from 6 different directions at once. Their formations began to break up as captains tried to turn their ships to face multiple threats. Maintain formation, Crixfoth ordered angrily. Do not break ranks, but the human attacks were too coordinated. Just as the alien ships turned to face the fighters, more missiles came from the asteroid belt. When they turned to deal with the missiles, the fighters struck again from a different angle. Captain Rodriguez watched the battle from her hidden command center deep inside a mountain. The alien ships were powerful, but they were acting like confused giants swatting at mosquitoes. Phase 2, she ordered. Okay, hit them where it hurts. The humans had spent weeks studying the Zephyrian ship designs from the Discovery scanner data. Okay, they had identified weak points in the alien vessels. Now those weak points became targets. Commander Tony Martinez led a squadron of small attack ships against the enemy fleet's supply vessels. These ships were lightly defended because the Zephyrians had never had to protect their rear lines before. The human attack ships were tiny compared to the alien vessels, but they were fast and hard to hit. Target their engine sections, Martinez ordered his pilots. Don't try to destroy them, just damage them enough to slow them down. The attack worked perfectly. 3 Zephyrian supply ships found their engines damaged and had to drop out of formation. The alien fleet's perfect order was beginning to fall apart. Back on the Shadowbane, Admiral Crixfoth was growing more frustrated by the minute. These humans fight like cowards, he snarled. They won't stand and face us in honorable battle. Admiral, perhaps we should adapt our tactics, suggested Commander Yelthane carefully. The humans are not fighting the way we expected. Adapt. Crixfoth's red eyes blazed with anger. The tactics of the Zephyrian Empire have conquered 12 star systems. Do not adapt to inferior species. They will learn to fear our might. But the humans were learning too. Dr. Martinez had predicted this reaction. The aliens were too proud to change their methods, even when those methods weren't working. This gave humanity a huge advantage. Colonel Hughes was leading ground forces in the colony's main city. When Zephyrian troops finally landed to take control, they found the streets empty. But the humans weren't gone. They were hidden in buildings, tunnels, and sewers, waiting. The alien ground troops were impressive. They stood 7 feet tall, wore advanced armor, and carried weapons that could blast through concrete walls. But they moved in straight lines, down the main streets, following standard military procedures. Wait for them to pass, Hughes whispered into his communicator. Let them think they've won. When the Zephyrian troops reached the city center, they found it deserted. A commander, a veteran warrior named Kexval, was puzzled. Wait, where were the humans? Then the attacks began. Explosions came from buildings on both sides of the street. Sniper fire rang out from rooftops and windows. The aliens found themselves trapped in a maze of urban warfare they had never experienced before. Fall back to defensive positions, Kexval ordered. But there were no defensive positions. Every building could hide enemies. Every street corner could be a trap. The battle for New Terra continued for 3 days. Zephyrians had expected to conquer the colony in 3 hours. Hey, their ships were running low on fuel and ammunition. Their ground troops were exhausted from fighting an enemy they couldn't see. Finally, Admiral Crixfoth made a decision that shocked his own officers. Withdraw all forces. We will regroup and plan a new assault. As the Zephyrian fleet pulled back, Captain Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. They hadn't won the battle, but they hadn't lost it either. More importantly, they had learned something valuable about their enemy. The Zephyrians were strong, but they were also predictable. They followed rules even when those rules weren't working. Humans, on the other hand, made up new rules as they went along. Dr. Martinez received the battle reports while working in her laboratory on Earth. The data was exactly what she needed. The human weapons had performed better than expected against Zephyrian armor. The alien energy shields had weak points that could be exploited. "Kate, look at this," she called to engineer Kate Williams. The Zephyrian shields failed when he hit with multiple small attacks instead of one big attack. Kate studied the data. "So instead of building bigger guns, we should build lots of smaller ones." "Exactly. And look at this." Martinez pointed to another section of the report. "Their ships can't fire and move at the same time. When they shoot, they have to stop and hold position." Dr. Alan Foster joined them at the computer. "That's a huge weakness. Our ships can fire while moving. We could hit them and be gone before they can return fire." The three scientists worked through the night, designing new weapons and tactics based on what they had learned. For the first time since the war began, they felt hope. Meanwhile, Admiral Krixvoth was sending an angry report to the Zephyrian High Command. The humans had not fought like civilized beings. They had used tricks and deception instead of honest combat. Supreme Overlord Dex Moore was not pleased. "Admiral, you told us this would be a simple mission. Now you report that 50 ships cannot defeat one primitive colony. The humans are more cunning than we expected. Supreme Overlord, they refuse to fight properly. Then make them fight properly. Use whatever force is necessary. The reputation of the Empire is at stake." Krixvoth bowed his head. "A Supreme Overlord, I will not fail again," as he prepared for the next assault. The Admiral couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important about these humans. They were supposed to be primitives, but they fought with a cleverness that reminded him of the old stories about the Zephyrian Empire's early days, when they had been the underdogs fighting against larger enemies. The thought made him uncomfortable. The Zephyrians had forgotten what it was like to be the weaker side in a fight. But these humans lived it every day. The war was just beginning, and already the humans were teaching the mighty Zephyrian Empire lessons it had never expected to learn. Dr. Alan Foster could barely contain his excitement as he stared at the alien power core on his laboratory table. The Zephyrian technology that Commander Tony Martinez had captured during his raid was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Energy output was incredible, but the design was surprisingly simple. "Kate, come look at this," he called to engineer Kate Williams, who was working on the other side of the lab. "I think I understand how their power systems work." Kate wiped her hands on the cloth and walked over. She had been trying to figure out how to integrate alien components with human systems for the past week. "What did you find?" "Their power cores are built for maximum output, but they can't adjust the flow," Foster explained, pointing at the glowing device. "It's like having a fire hose that only works at full blast. It's wasteful, but very powerful." "Can we use it?" Foster grinned. "Better than that, I think we can improve it." 3 days later, their breakthrough was ready for testing. Dr. Martinez stood in the weapons testing facility with Colonel Nina Brooks and systems analyst Dr. Joel Peterson. They were about to test the first human-Savian hybrid weapon ever built. "The theory is simple," Martinez explained to the military observers. "We take their power source and connect it to our targeting system. It's their energy, our flexibility." The test target was a piece of Zephyrian armor that had been recovered from the New Terra battle. The human weapons had barely scratched it before. Now they would see what the hybrid weapon could do. "Fire when ready," Colonel Brooks ordered. The new weapon hummed quietly for a moment, then released a focused beam of energy. The Zephyrian armor which had seemed indestructible just days before, melted like ice cream in the sun. Incredible, Dr. Peterson whispered. The armor didn't just break. It was completely destroyed. Word of the breakthrough spread quickly through the human fleet. Captain Steve Murphy, who commanded the newly rebuilt destroyer, used Defiance, was among the first to receive the upgraded weapons. His ship had been equipped with 3 of the hybrid energy cannons and a dozen smaller versions, 4-point defense. Murphy was eager to test them in real combat. He didn't have to wait long. Admiral Crixfoth had regrouped his forces and was attacking the mining station at Kepler 7. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser Doomstrike was leading the assault. He was confident that the humans would use the same defensive tactics as before. Captain Murphy brought his ship out of hyperspace behind the alien vessel. The Zephyrians detected him immediately, but they weren't worried. One small human ship against a heavy cruiser was hardly a fair fight. Human vessel, surrender now or be destroyed, came the standard Zephyrian demand. Murphy smiled grimly. This is Captain Steve Murphy of the UES Defiance. I have a better idea. How about you surrender to us? The alien response was predictable. The Doomstrike turned its massive guns toward the small human ship and fired. But Murphy was ready. Instead of trying to absorb the blast with shields, he used a new tactic that the humans had developed. His ship spun and twisted through space, making it almost impossible to hit. The Zephyrian weapons were powerful, but they were designed to hit large, slow-moving targets. A small ship dancing through space like a leaf in the wind was something they had never encountered before. While the alien ship was trying to track his movements, Murphy struck back. The hybrid weapons on the Defiance fired with devastating effect. The energy beams punched through the Zephyrian shields as if they weren't there and tore deep holes in the cruiser's hull. The alien ship shuddered under the impact. On the bridge, Captain Vex Moore stared in disbelief at his damage reports. Impossible. How can such a small ship have such powerful weapons? His tactical officer was equally confused. Captain, their energy signatures don't match anything in our database. These weapons seem to be using our own technology somehow. The battle was over in minutes. The Doomstrike, pride of the Zephyrian fleet, was drifting helplessly in space, with its engines destroyed and its weapon systems offline. Captain Murphy had achieved something no one thought possible. A single human ship had defeated a Zephyrian heavy cruiser. News of the victory reached Admiral Helen Cross within hours. She was meeting with General Robert Kane and Intelligence Officer Major Linda Hayes, planning the next phase of human operations. This changes everything, Cross said, studying the battle reports. One ship can do this much damage. Imagine what a whole fleet could accomplish. Major Hayes nodded. Admiral, our intelligence suggests that the Zephyrians are starting to panic. They've never lost ships like this before. Their commanders don't know how to respond. General Kane looked at the tactical displays. Stand we need to keep the pressure on them. Launch Operation Prometheus. Operation Prometheus was the most ambitious military campaign in human history. Instead of just defending their colonies, human forces would go on the attack. They would hit Zephyrian supply lines, attack their outposts, and force them to fight the kind of war they had never experienced before. Commander Beth Taylor led the first assault group. Her target was a Zephyrian supply depot in the Vega system. The aliens had never bothered to defend it heavily because no enemy had ever penetrated this deep into their territory. Taylor's ships included engineer Ray Collins, who had developed a new type of drone weapon. These small, smart missiles could think for themselves and coordinate their attacks. When the human fleet arrived at Vega, they released thousands of the tiny drones. The Zephyrian defenders were overwhelmed. Their sensors couldn't track so many small targets at once. Their weapons, designed to destroy large ships, were useless against swarms of tiny attackers. Within hours, the supply depot was completely destroyed. More importantly, Speed squeeved, the humans captured detailed maps of Zephyrian territory and lists of their military installations. The information was sent back to Earth immediately. Dr. Martinez received the intelligence data with great interest. The Zephyrians had dozens of supply depots, weapons factories, and communication centers scattered across their empire. All of them were lightly defended because the aliens had never needed to protect their rear areas before. It's like they built their entire military to attack outward, but never thought about defending themselves. She told Admiral Cross during their daily briefing, "Can we use that? Absolutely. If we can hit enough of their support facilities, their frontline forces will run out of supplies and ammunition. They'll have to pull back to defend their own territory." The plan worked better than anyone had dared hope. Human strike teams began hitting Zephyrian installations throughout their empire. Each attack was small, but together they created chaos in the alien supply network. Admiral Krixvoth found himself fighting a war on multiple fronts. Every time he concentrated his forces to attack a human target, 3 more of his own bases would come under attack. His fleet was running low on fuel and spare parts because the supply convoys kept getting destroyed. "Supreme Overlord," he reported to his superiors, "the humans are not fighting like any enemy we have faced before. They attack everywhere at once. Cannot predict where they will strike next." Supreme Overlord Dex Moore was furious. "Admiral, you told us these humans were primitives. Now you report that they are destroying our supply network and defeating our heavy cruisers with single ships. The humans have somehow acquired our technology and improved upon it," Krixvoth explained desperately. "Their weapons are now as powerful as ours, but their ships are faster and more agile. Then send more ships. Send everything we have." Krixvoth hesitated. "Supreme Overlord, if we commit our entire fleet against the humans, our other territories may rebel. Already, some of our subject species are refusing to send tribute. They sense weakness." This was exactly what the humans had hoped for. By proving that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated, they had inspired other alien species to rise up against their oppressors. The mighty empire that had ruled 12 star systems was beginning to crumble from within. Captain Morrison, back in command of the rebuilt Discovery, received reports of alien rebellions throughout Zephyrian space. The Keth had declared independence. The Morphians had destroyed their Zephyrian overseers. Even the peaceful Valdorians were refusing to cooperate with their conquerors. "It's working," he told Admiral Cross over the communication system. "The Empire is falling apart. They're having to fight wars on a dozen fronts now." Cross smiled grimly. "Kana, then it's time for the final phase. Gather the fleet. We're going to end this war once and for all." The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed invincible just months before, was now fighting for its very survival. And humanity, the species they had dismissed as primitive mammals, was preparing to deliver the final blow. The galaxy was about to learn that picking a fight with humans had been the biggest mistake the Zephyrian Empire had ever made. The space around Earth had never seen so many warships gathered in one place. Admiral Helen Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Victory, watching as 300 human vessels prepared for the final battle. Ships from every human colony had come together for this moment. Miners, traders, explorers, and soldiers, all united with one purpose. "Admiral, the Zephyrian fleet has been detected," reported Communications Officer Amy Thompson. "They're coming out of hyperspace now." Cross looked at the tactical display. The enemy force was massive. Over 300 Zephyrian warships, including their most powerful battleships, were forming up for what their leaders believed would be the final crushing blow against humanity. "All ships, this is Admiral Cross," she announced on the fleet-wide channel. "Today, we end this war. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. And remember that we've already proven these aliens can be beaten. Captain Jake Morrison, back in command of the rebuilt Discovery, felt his heart racing as he watched the enemy fleet approach. The ship that had started this whole conflict was now part of the largest human battle fleet ever assembled. "Captain, we're receiving new orders," said Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker from the tactical station. "We're to lead the diversionary attack on their left flank." Morrison nodded. The plan was complex but elegant. Instead of meeting the Zephyrian fleet head-on in a traditional battle, the humans would split their forces and attack from multiple directions. It was risky, but it played to their strengths. On the Zephyrian flagship Eternal Dominion, Supreme Overlord Vex Mor himself had come to oversee the destruction of humanity. The massive alien leader stood 8 feet tall on his command bridge, his 4 arms crossed as he studied the human fleet. Admiral Crixvoth deployed the fleet in standard battle formation. He ordered, "We will crush these mammals with overwhelming firepower and restore the Empire's reputation." Crixvoth looked uncomfortable. "Supreme Overlord, the humans have shown unusual tactical abilities. Perhaps we should consider a more flexible approach." Vex Mor's red eyes blazed with anger. "Flexible? The tactics of the Zephyrian Empire have conquered half the galaxy. We do not change our methods for inferior creatures." The battle began exactly as Admiral Cross had predicted. The Zephyrian fleet formed their traditional battle lines and began advancing in perfect formation. They expected the humans to do the same, setting up for a massive slugging match where superior alien firepower would win the day. Instead, the human fleet scattered like a school of fish. Captain Morrison led 50 ships in a wide curve around the Zephyrian left flank. Commander Sarah Davis took her fighter squadrons, diving beneath the alien formation. Lieutenant Alex Thompson brought his fast attack ships screaming in from above. The aliens found themselves under attack from 6 different directions at once. Their perfect formation began to break apart as ship commanders tried to turn to face multiple threats. "Maintain formation." Vex Mor roared over the communication system. "Do not break ranks." But it was impossible. Every time the Zephyrian ships turned to face one group of attackers, another group would strike from a different angle. The human ships were smaller and faster, darting in and out of range like angry wasps attacking a giant dot. Dr. Lisa Martinez, now serving as science officer aboard the Victory, watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. The Zephyrians were reacting exactly as she had predicted they would. "Admiral, their command ship is trying to restore order to their formation," she reported. "If we can disrupt their communications, their fleet will fall into complete chaos." Admiral Cross smiled grimly. "Captain Turner, are you ready for your mission?" On the bridge of the light cruiser used Defiant, Captain Rick Turner nodded grimly. His ship had been specially modified for a suicide run against the enemy flagship. The plan was desperate, but it was the only way to break through the massive ship's defenses. "All hands, this is the captain," Turner announced to his crew. "It's been an honor serving with you for Earth." The Defiant broke away from the main human fleet and accelerated directly toward the Eternal Dominion. The Zephyrian flagship immediately focused all its weapons on the approaching ship. But Turner had expected this. His ship twisted and spun through space, dodging the worst of the alien fire. The hull was taking terrible damage, but the engines kept running. As they approached the enemy flagship, Turner made his final transmission. "Victory, this is Defiant. Tell my family I died free." The Defiant smashed into the Eternal Dominion's command section at full speed. The explosion tore a massive hole in the alien flagship and knocked out most of its communication systems. With their command structure disrupted, the Zephyrian fleet began to fall apart. Ship captains who had been trained to follow orders without question suddenly found themselves without anyone to give them orders. Admiral Cross seized the moment. "All ships, press the attack. Show them what happens when." You pick a fight with humanity. The human fleet closed in from all sides. The hybrid weapons that Dr. Foster had developed tore through Zephyrian shields and armor. The drone swarms created by engineer Ray Collins overwhelmed the alien point defenses. The new tactics developed by Colonel Hughes and Captain Rodriguez turned every engagement into a disaster for the enemy. Supreme Overlord Dex Moore watched his empire's finest fleet being destroyed around him. Ships that had conquered entire star systems were exploding one by one. The humans fought with a coordination and creativity that the Zephyrians couldn't match. How is this possible? He demanded. They are primitives, mammals. They should not be able to defeat us. Admiral Krixvoth, his own ship damaged and listing, finally spoke the truth that his leaders had refused to hear. Supreme Overlord, they are not primitives. They are warriors, unlike any we have ever faced. They adapt. They learn. They never give up. A human missile strike hit the Eternal Dominion's main reactor. The massive ship began to break apart, its hull splitting under the stress of internal explosions. Dex Moore realized that the mighty Zephyrian Empire was about to die with him. All ships retreat, he ordered desperately. Full withdrawal. It was too late. The human fleet had surrounded the remaining Zephyrian vessels. Admiral Cross opened a communication channel to the surviving alien ships. Attention Zephyrian forces. This is Admiral Helen Cross of the United Earth Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and your lives will be spared. Continue fighting and you will share the fate of your flagship. One by one, the Zephyrian ships powered down their weapons and surrendered. The mighty empire that had ruled 12 star systems for centuries had been broken by a species they had dismissed as inferior creatures. 6 months later, Ambassador Julie Williams stood in the council chambers of New Geneva, Earth's capital. Representatives from dozens of alien species had come to sign peace treaties with humanity. Former subjects of the Zephyrian Empire were declaring independence and asking for human protection. The Keth delegation was particularly grateful. Your species has given us something we thought was lost forever, their ambassador said. Hope. The galaxy is free because you showed us that even the mightiest empire can fall. Dr. Martinez, now serving as Earth's chief scientific advisor, was briefing the United Earth Council on reports from distant sectors of the galaxy. The news of our victory has spread throughout known space, she explained. Several hostile species that were planning to expand into our region have changed their minds. They're actively avoiding human territory now. Captain Morrison, promoted to Admiral after the final battle, was reading intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The stories were all the same. Aggressive alien species were backing down from conflicts. Peaceful races were asking for human assistance. The galaxy's entire balance of power had shifted. It's remarkable, he told Admiral Cross during their weekly meeting. A year ago, we didn't even know aliens existed. Now, we're considered the dominant military power in this entire region of space. Cross nodded thoughtfully. The Zephyrians made a critical error. They thought that being strong meant being rigid. They never learned the most important lesson of warfare, Lycia, which is, the strongest species isn't the one with the biggest guns or the most advanced technology. It's the one that can adapt, learn, and overcome any challenge. That's what makes humans dangerous. We don't just fight wars, we perfect them. The story ended with a scene that would become legend throughout the galaxy. An alien diplomat from a distant star system was asking his military advisor about the possibility of expanding into human space. I would strongly advise against it, the military officer replied nervously. The humans destroyed the Zephyrian Empire in less than 2 years. Word has spread throughout the galaxy about what happens when you threaten their kind. Surely, they can't be that dangerous, the diplomat said dismissively. The military officer pulled up a recording of the final battle, showing human ships dancing. through space while massive alien vessels exploded around them. Sir, with all respect, the humans didn't just defeat the Zephyrians, they made it look easy. They turned a species that had conquered half the galaxy into a cautionary tale. Diplomat watched the recording in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Cancel all expansion plans toward human territory. In fact, send them a message of friendship. The last thing we want is to pick a fight with the deadliest species in the galaxy. And so humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as the species that had proven that intelligence, adaptability, and determination could overcome any challenge. The galaxy had learned to respect the small blue planet and its remarkable inhabitants. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of underestimating humanity. It was a mistake that no one would ever make again.